This video is not only going to help you succeed in creating different interesting cornucopia for all of the occasions throughout the year, it is also going to teach you the techniques that you don't know yet in a unique way, step by step, so that your next centerpiece, your next dinner party, your next event is going to have truly wow factor.
The lavender hedge needs trimming. It is the perfect material to make a cornucopia. If you haven't got a lavender hedge that needs trimming, you can use hay, straw, anything like that at all. This cornucopia I want to be fairly small, so I'm going to take off these woody bits of the lavender. If you're using hay, you won't have to do this. And I'm going to start by making a snake. I've got reel wire here, black reel wire. Attach the reel wire to one of these, just go round a couple of times, then add the next one and the next one. Make fairly big ones, and you're going to end up with this wonderful snake of lavender. Now this is where I am going to make the horn of my cornucopia, and I'm going to wind it round, so this has to be able to bend, and that's why I'm using the wire. So as you're winding it round, you're thinking about the shape that you're trying to create, and every now and again you're bringing it back through so one layer is connecting with another layer. Then you keep going round and round and round. The thicker you make these strands, the quicker your cornucopia is going to be to make. Wanting to make it bigger as we go out, so we now bind two of them together. To connect one to another, you can use a cable tie, as I have there. If you've got cable ties the same colour, I haven't, and I didn't want that black showing, but I just popped it there to show you. And with this big long thing, as I'm going around, I've got very fine wire. Push it through the one before, fine so that you can't see it, 3 times, and cut it off, and that will hold each coil as I go up. So I'm going to carry on going up, and as I'm going I'm making it bigger and bigger and bigger. Because it's all wired, and I will be able to manipulate this into a better shape after I finish doing it. The smell, by the way, is amazing as I'm crushing the lavender. Now you can shape it with your wiring. For example, if I want this to go up further, because these coils will open up, and I can push it so these ones will close up on the top here by put a big piece of wire there, and that will give us that lovely shell shape. And I want it to go right up, so right up like this, so round. Tin snips, by the way. By doing that, you can see it's given it that, starting to get that cornucopia point going on there. So this is the base now, this is where it's going to sit, and so that I can carry on and with my coil getting it as big as I really want it. Because it's a table setting, I don't want it much wider. You'll see what I'm going to put in it when I've finished, but it does require having quite a big opening there. The lavender will lose its smell over the course of probably about 2 or 3 weeks, and it will go slightly grey. This is as wide and as long as I want it, so I have let the coil peter out and put nothing on it and wired it right to the end there. And now I'm going to just take that last piece of wire, which I've already cut off the reel, and tuck it in underneath one of these wires here and curl it in and away, and that will finish it off really neatly. I want still to have this cone, so I need a sort of a little bit of help with it. So I found this little pot, and that's going to just give me a wee bit of a guide to how to create that horn on the top. So once again, start with a coil. This time I'm using much smaller twigs, and as I bring them along, I'm also using finer wire, making the coil much thinner. This isn't real wire. If I could find real wire that was in this gauge, I would. You can see it's very fine, but it doesn't actually matter at this point. And now, as I curl it round, I will attach that piece to that piece, and that has started off my little top knot. I've just wired it loosely so it connects some of the coils, because I don't want it straight like that. I actually want it on a curl. So just like I did with the other one, a strong piece of wire, poke it through there and force those top coils together, and that will give me a curve. And of course these coils separate as these ones come together, and then back to the original piece. That's how it's sitting. So that is how we want the top knot, and just wire 4 or 5 all the way around there. So this one's going through here, hand in here. So the first one will be the most difficult. I'm turning it round with my hand into a hook shape, back out, pushing it through that coil of lavender, and twist it round and around and cut it off. So I'm going to do that in 4 places. A cool way to get rid of the hairiness of something like this without having to use wire is fishing line. Fishing line disappears, and yet it will tie in all the pieces. So on this one I'm going to use fishing line. Just find a gap in your coil, tie a knot. Reef knots work really well with fishing line. It's going to do exactly the same job as if it was real wire, but it's invisible. As invisible as we can make it. And the more I go round, the less hairy it's going to be. It's also going to help this top knot stay where I want it. I can say stay, a little cunning thing. I can pop it around a piece of twig, bring it back, and it will keep it where I want it round. You won't see that because when I do this, it flattens it all down, and you could do this for ages and ages until you've got that lovely flatness that you will require. When you think you've put enough on, so it's going to hold everything together, go back and find your original piece, tie it back to it, with a little knot, cut it off, and you're ready to add the filling. Now the filling is going to be food. This is designed for a dinner party, and because it's going to have food inside it, I am using a paper towel right in there just to keep it really, really hygienic. So there's your shape. That's the method. Now it's just embellishments, and I have a board. Use a board, it's easily carried, it keeps everything that you can flow your cornucopia out of it. And I am going to use edible plants. There's no point putting anything on a dinner table if you're going to add things that they can take out, if you're going to put something in there that they can't eat. And so I have got parsley, nasturtium leaves, rosemary, nasturtium flower, tiny little peppers, last of the season on the bush, and some chilies. So if anybody at the feast wants to say, look at me, and I'm brave, I can eat chilies, it's not going to hurt them. So little buns, you could get buns of all sorts of shapes and sizes. Put them right up here. Oh, the smell now is amazing. Even if you're having a luncheon and soup and buns. Now as you stack them up, we can now start adding some of these edible things. I haven't chosen too much rosemary because it's too much the same as the lavender, which makes it a wee bit tizzy. These sort of things will last for several hours out of water. Bit of nasturtium down here, and then you pile up the buns at the base. These obviously have just come from the supermarket. Definitely could make your own if you're a baker. Impressive with the bakery part of you. So it's spilling out along the board. Tuck the parsley underneath. The nasturtium. Nasturtium flowers are also edible. Cut them off a wee bit there. And these little, see how the contrast there, it's making it lovely and shiny. Some chilies for anybody who's brave enough to take some chilies, and a little bit more parsley. A cornucopia fit for a fabulous soup and buns, or a feast for a wedding, and a really, really cool way to introduce really quite plain bread rolls with a cornucopia you made yourself. This method, find yourself some Muhlenbeckia or some bracken, both of which stick together beautifully. Just make the shape of your cornucopia by squeezing them all together like this, however big you want it. Dried bracken is fabulous for this. So there's the top coming down to my base there. Can you see a cone shape starting to take place? Right, when you're happy with sort of that, you've got a general horn shape, this is when the wire comes in, and I'm going to use copper wire, bullion wire. Start at the top. This is the top of my cornucopia. Use thicker wire if it's going to work better for you. Looks like a shambles to start with. By the time you've finished, it will be all cool. Round we go a bit more. Now we're coming down to the base of the horn. And of course, once you've done it, it'll last for ages. actually now go around to the bottom. The wire's sealing that shape. And back to the top again. You can see it's starting to form the shape. Twist it how you want it. And then go back down again. Very, very light, this one. I'm just going to tie it off here. Have a look at my shape. And just see if I want to improve it in any way before I get too far into it. Just twisting the wire around a branch and around itself. How's it looking? It's a bit skinny in that bit. Pull it out a bit there. And I also want it to be hollow. So now I'm going to get in there like this. So I'm starting to create an opening to put all my goodies. Just put your hands in and tease it so that it's teased apart like that. So now I've got this really cool opening. And there you have it. Can you see it? With my opening there, and that's my basic cornucopia shape. I'm going to pull it up this way a bit more. I'm going to squash it this way a bit more. So that'll be my shape, and I'm going to go round and round and round again with the wire until it's holding it in that shape for me. Now I'm happy with the shape and I've added a few more layers of wire. I'm going around the opening, just grabbing a bundle and wiring it through the opening, just so that it defines the edges. On my workbench I have this metal plate, and it has had a bolt welded to it, and this metal rod has had a thread lathed onto it. I've picked a very, very short rod, tighten it up, and then thread the cornucopia the angle that you want it over the top. This makes it really, really easy to carry, and there's just no danger of it falling over. Also the spike, which you can see in there, just is well out of any harm's way. Nobody's going to find that or touch that, and it keeps it all really secure. So that is another method for you of how to construct your cornucopia. I guess we should fill it with something. Well, the theme for this one will be winter and all of the cool things that happen in winter. This is the dried leaf from the Idacia tree. I was using the berries or something and saw these leaves, and I have hung them up for a week with a peg inside in the warm in the garage, and so they have dried to these beautiful curly shapes. But what's astonishing me is they have retained that lovely green colour. So I'm going to use that as my base. Everything I'm using is going to last forever, so I can glue whatever I want into place if it doesn't just thread into that beautiful Mullenbeckia or bracken, if that's what you're using. And now I'm going to put in a grouping of this lovely flannel flower. This was picked probably 2 weeks ago, and it just doesn't deteriorate at all. Trying to get contrast, so we've got fluffy, we've got smooth. I've now got these little pine coney things. I've got that type, which is from a completely different plant than that one, but they're bringing the brown of the top down in, and I'll make a group of those, and because they are so big I will definitely glue those in place. I've now got some beautiful bay leaves, and they've got these little green berries on them here, so I can put some of those in as well. With a cornucopia, the more that you can put in that's showing this great amount of variety, the better. Camellia leaves will do the same thing. What you're just trying to get is this sumptuous contrast. time for the red berries. Complementary colours, red. Idecia, they will dry brown. Pop them in with glue. It's now got that lovely line of the Cornucopia, and all of these things are spilling out. I've put it on the Lazy Susan. Decorative wire, tiny bit of aluminium wire. That is what you need, plus a bean rack for a garden. It's huge. No, we're not going to make it that big. The top of it is a beautiful cone shape, and that's what we need. Glue stick. This is the only reason I've got this is because the circumference of it is bigger than the circumference on the knot on the top. And I'm going to use it just to wind round to make the top knot. When it comes off, squish it down and it will go over there. We've got 4 here, we actually want 8. So bend the wire not evenly. If you bend the wire evenly, you're going to have to join it exactly the same place. So we'll put the wire through the bottom 2 and give it a twist. Just one twist will hold it in place there, and do this 8 times. So you're going to end up with 16 pieces of wire hanging down. I have soaked some of the flat cane in water, probably for an hour. The reason to do this is to make it more pliable, malleable, because it's going to be alright when we get down to the bigger part of the cornucopia, but when we're at the very, very top, we're wanting these to bend quite tightly, and cane will crack if it hasn't been soaked. So that is far more pliable. So you start anywhere. Pegs will help. If you have problems with this piece, just use pegs. Put it between the 2 legs of that piece of wire and twist it around so it is holding that piece of cane in place. Now to go to the second one, flick one over the top, and just always twist them in the same direction. The more twists you do, the wider the gap between your pieces of cane. So I have put that one over the top and twist it. Move around, do the next one. This is tatami wiring. You see it in a lot of processes these days. Extremely popular Japanese technique. It's not just used for cane, it's used for all sorts of plant material. First is always just a little bit difficult. That's why it's important to have a frame like this so that it can hold things for you as you do that first row. Once you get into it, you'll find it's actually quite easy. Now we're back to where we started here. So flip that underneath so it's tidy, and we're now going to spiral down to the next row, and from now on we'll be spiraling. So once again, twist and leave it round to the next one. Make sure we pick the right one. Right, and that's what I mean. If you want to peg it here while you go, do so, because it will keep it neat for you. Try to keep it as close as you can to this frame, because this frame is going to be guiding that cone shape. Remember, see how I'm pulling it quite tight so that it's keeping as close to that frame as it can. Right, so we'll come to the next row, so just like we did last time, keeping that joint underneath so it gets eventually will be hidden. Got to there, I need to add some more cane. So going back into my little dish of wet cane, cut it on an angle. The human eye doesn't see an angle as much as it sees a flat. Pop it on top and carry on with your twist. And you're ready to carry on around. Top knot is done, and at this point a decision needs to be made. Are you going to make your cornucopia so that it curls up like this? Are you going to give it a flat bottom and just having that curl because you want to sit it on the ground? Or are you going to create just a cone shape, which is more of a horn of plenty than it is a cornucopia? What I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this piece here flat. So this will sit flat like this, and I'm going to curve this piece out. So putting it back on my former, when I carry on going round, I'm going to keep this as just slightly going out, keeping to this shape, but this one I'm going to make it fatter and fatter and fatter out this side, curving like this. So as I come to this part, I will make it looser, and I come to this part, I will keep it so it's hard against there. So far that's probably taken me probably 15 or 20 minutes, maybe a wee bit longer. So this cornucopia is definitely one that is only really worth making if you want to use it over and over and over and over again, or obviously if you're a florist and you want to sell it for a special occasion. If you get to a piece now that's going to end, you do exactly the same thing as you've been doing with the cane, but you do with it the wire. So now you just lay the wire beside each other and treat the wire as if it's two pieces. So when you put the next piece of cane in, twist it around the two pieces. I put a wee dot where I made that last join because that's telling me that this is the back of the cornucopia, the flat part. So when I get to here, I'm keeping it as flat as I can against that former, and you can see in the turn around just in that small piece there, there's the flat back, and that's what I'm saying, going out more and more and more and more and more from the former. I'm going to leave this overnight. A wee bit of PVA just down along there, and then in the morning when it's dry, because it takes a couple of hours, well, overnight probably, I can trim those ones up. This one here I'll do the same too, and then I can cut this piece off that of course has got my little reminder that that's the back of it. So when I take it off, I can now go, is that as long as I want it? It is for a table, it's not for a great big feasting table, it's a small table, so that is ample, wide enough, long enough. That's the bottom of it there, and that gives us quite a different cornucopia. And then when you twist this out, it will give you that little top knot end to it. The glue is dried overnight, so it's made those all nicely aligned. And then all I have to do, or you have to do if you're doing it as well, is cut these little pieces off. Try and get them at an angle so that they are less visible. Of course, if you're clever enough, you'll be able to put those joins underneath on the base. Now, I have purposely kept my little dotted piece here, so I know that's the underneath. And just need to finish off this top. There's lots of ways of finishing it. You can thread beads on it and wind them round. You could put a piece of rope right the way around the edges of it. I'm going to do it very, very simply because of the theme that I'm going to use for this cornucopia. So with the pliers, do the final twist, the pliers around, cut them off here. And then bend that back on itself. That is the simplest way to finish it. There it is, another method for constructing a cornucopia, and it can be as big as you want, and the cane doesn't have to be flat cane, and you could also use willow, you could use vine, it doesn't even have to be cane. The method is that tatami wiring and using, of course, a former of some sort to sit it on. So now let's look at the style. Well, I'm going to go into a style that has been influenced by the Dutch painters and also the Japanese flower arrangers, and it is that style of decay. In autumn, the Japanese believe that a leaf that is off the tree and dying is just as beautiful as when it's green and on the tree, and therefore they love using autumn leaves. We all like, I'm sure, the colour of them, but they actually see this as part of life and death. I've found some apples, and the apples are old. You'll never find them like this in a supermarket, but I love that look. I love that decaying look. And then adding to that a bit of the autumn, the autumnal theme. So mandarins, onions, which are harvested this time of the year in autumn, the last of the pomegranates on the tree, and the very first of those spring flowers, that one is narcissus, and we call it paper whites. The smell is divine. So we've got three contrasts here of form, round leaf shapes, and these paper whites, but they are all in this colour scheme of these golds and yellows. Because it's about decay, I've selected a board on purpose that is less than perfect, shall we say. I didn't want a sparkling piece of glass or a perfectly formed tray. I wanted a board that had a life. It's clean, but it has had a life, and it has its own character. So when we put the cornucopia, looking to see where my spot is, so I know at the bottom. So when we put the cornucopia on it, which is all shiny and sparkling and new, but add these other things, it will keep going with that theme. And this, of course, will go into the centre of a table. So I'm going to start with my leaves. And the very easiest way to do this is to tip them straight in. If you are able to do this on a table where you're going to be feasting, of course, you would also be able to spread them around the people's plates so that you've got this whole autumnal flow. All different shapes of leaves, colours. I tried to pick them. If you want to know where they're from, that's from a maple in Asa. That one is from a weeping elm. This one is from an apple tree. And these ones here are from liquid amber. Now the trick with the cornucopia is always start things from the inside. Don't start out here because it's got to be tumbling out of the cornucopia. And of course, because of the gaps in here, you can see the leaves and things through that. And it softens this whole big piece through there. I mean, this is just gorgeous. And now we start adding things. I've obviously got lots and lots of these mandarins, so we put them quite a long way back. Amongst the leaves. You see why they're on a board. There's no need to stick them in the floral phone or anything like this. This is still about abundance, even in autumn when things are dying off and going to sleep for the winter. This is still about, there's plenty about and there's still beauty in it. And a couple of onions. Even though this is a fruit bowl or whatever, you're still using these design principles of contrast, of shiny with dull and rough with smooth. All those contrasts still have to happen. Right, so it's putting more right in the back here. And then finally we're going to add these beautiful paper whites, but they will need water. If you are buying them, don't buy them like that. If you have a look, you'll see almost every flower is out. You want to buy them with as many of these little pieces here still to come up as possible, because if these come up, they will then flower. As these ones die, these will replace them, and so it will seem that your paper white is lasting much, much longer than it is. If you are at the flower market and you see one that just looks like that, that's the one to buy. That's going to last much longer, not in florifoam and water, because all of the buds are still sitting down in there. A orchid foil plastic with the lid that the orchids come in, or anything that you buy that comes by courier, and I'm just going to put 3 of these beautiful little flowers into them. Stems right to the base, and then pop them right in. So they're sitting like that. So everything's tumbling out of this cornucopia from that top. Next ones will go low. This is creating the most beautiful smell, of course, also for these things. Just pop them so they're in groups. If you need to move some of your fruit, it's not an issue. You're wanting to hide those files. Right, so they're all in tubes. I've done 4 placements and it's just tumbling out. But there is something still that's odd. Why would we have gold here if the gold is nowhere else? Because everything has to talk to each other to give unity. The wiring, which is orange, of course goes with the mandarins and the autumn colours. So I have a pen here and I have the same aluminium wire, and I'm just going to make what I call folly. Just little bits of folly, cut them a little bit long, and just pop them in here and there. Not only does it bring the gold from the back to the front, but it also adds shine. And the shine against all these dull things, from a design point of view, is a lovely contrast. And there you have it, an autumnal cornucopia based on the Japanese and Dutch masters' concepts of decay and new life coming, of course, with spring. Fabulous table setting, and once your table is set, sprinkle more autumn leaves right the way around the table and it'll be gorgeous. This mechanic is going to give your hands a wee bit of a workout, so wear gloves if you need to, and it starts with a 7-stranded piece of wire. We call this washing line wire, but when I last stranded up my mother's washing line, it was actually plastic. If you can't find it, just use normal wire, but you can see it is quite heavy, and there are all the strands. And we start by making the circular opening. Because this is for a table setting, we don't want it enormous. So I'm just rolling it down here, and this is the advantage of having all these strands, because now I can just take the strand, wire already supplied, and wind it round so that it will hold the circle in shape. If you need to hold this in a vise, then take the next one and do the same. So by the end of it, you're going to have this circle secured by 6 or 7 pieces of this stranded wire. Alright, so that's holding it that way. Undo one of them this way, and I'm going to put it this way so it holds that one in place. It's very, very stiff, this wire. It's too much for your hands. Pick something softer. When you feel that's lovely and solid, use your tin snips just to take those off. Don't discard those, they may come in handy for you. I've also cut from the coil 6 of these. Now that curve is a natural curve. Because this wire comes on a coil, it will be sort of pre-curved for you. I have unwound some of that wire back on it. So to attach that to that, just mentally divide your circle in half, and exactly the same thing, put it over here and then wind it both ways. It's such a wonderful way to attach wire to wire when you don't have a welder. Now go opposite there and do exactly the same with the second one. You'll discover you don't need to put all the strands around the rim, as long as it's really secure. That's really, really tight. So once again, use the tin snips. We don't need those ones. Cut them off. So that gives us our 2 main ones. I'm now going to put them in thirds. One there, one there, one there, and one there. Now you've got them all like that, gather up all of the ends so they're not crossing over each other. And it's just at this point that you start manipulating it into the shape you want it. So I'm holding it up here and pressing down on these bits because I want these down till we get the semblance of a cornucopia shape. Alright, now I can bend these ones up. We can then use these bits of wire that we cut off and just bind the top there and fiddle with it just until you've got the shape you're really, really happy with, because this is basically your former. This probably won't be seen. I'm using a paving block as my base and a metal rod that's on a circle. You might use a piece of wood and you might be able to have this straight down into the wood. This time we're going to do an upward facing cornucopia. If you have a look at this statue of a Roman or Greek god in the Palace of Versailles Gardens, I'm not sure what the god is, you'll see that he is holding it upright. I don't want it to be seen, but if I have it in the middle, I'm going to have to put something across there. I don't want to do that, so I will pop it so it is discreet as it possibly can be. Use some of your waste wire, twist it. Right, pliers required. I have some metal mesh here, and so I'm going to pop this along the base, scrunch it up, and then cut across it once again with the tin snips, just to distract your eye away from that circular piece there. And a bit of hot glue underneath there, and it will hold it in. Little bits you've got left over can dance on the top. Tie down these little pieces here with this fine silver wire. Should make you have this wire thick. It really is just coordinating all of these pieces before we add the plant material and foliage and all of those other wonderful things we're going to use on this. And then these bits here, just separate them all out. That is your next mechanic of how to make the foundations of a cornucopia. I've been out and found 3 different sorts of sticks. These are rickers from the weeping elm. This is dogwood that has been in my store, so it's been cut for a while and won't shrink. And this is from the fig tree. It is winter, this time of the year, there's no figs on it. And what I liked about the fig tree was lovely curves plus beautiful knobbly bits, so it would make the cornucopia itself really, really interesting. And I particularly only picked the branches that had a curve on them because I can then put that there and it can go right up to there on that curve and create that line, reinforce that line. These bits of wire, if we can, we will make as insignificant as possible. I'm going to use therefore the fig first, and then I'm going to add some of the other ones just to add so much texture on contrast so this doesn't look so blank, because all of the other plant material is just going to be in the top there. To do that, pretty obvious. Use cable ties if it's quicker for you that are the same colour as the plant material you're going to use. I don't have cable ties, so I am going to use the silver wire and just attach it top and bottom with the standard 1, 2, 3 twist round and cut off, and do the same at the bottom so it is secured. And of course we'll see these tiny bits of wiring maybe through it, and that doesn't matter because that silver then becomes part of the same as the silver of the base, bringing it up to here and put it in. So I'm going to cover all this with those ones here just in that same way. So there's my basic outline, making sure everything was curved outwards, and then I've also brought the smaller ones up to this side so that we're getting the sweep. With those in place, I can now fill in the gaps. So once again, I'm going to go around and tie them top and bottom either to the fig or to each other or to the top here, so we're getting this whole piece enclosed. It's probably going to take me 20 or 30 minutes. Have a close look and you'll now see that every single one of these rickers is attached in 2 places to either the wire or something else, and I've done that for every single one of these twigs. The fabulous thing about rickers is that they bend, so it will give you the shape that you want as you tie them here to the wire, here to the wire. Now I've got all of these to go, and I'm going to put every single one of them on, remembering of course also include some on this piece here. Now we can start adding the things for the inside. You could put a bowl around the top of this rim here and sit it inside that if you've made your circle the same size as your bowl and floral foam. But have a look at that statue again and you'll see it's got pine cones in it. So let's put some pine cones and completely fill this up. They've been sprayed with just a tiny tinge of silver on them. They fill it up really, really quickly. But then also you can see that just silver tinge coming through from the back. If you don't like this top all like this, you can trim it tidily. I like that rustic look. The story of the cornucopia is that it is always abundant, there's always lots of variety in it. And I'm going to do in the colour scheme of white, green and pink. Pink just so that it brings out the pink in these dogwood sticks. The test tubes I am going to wire. Once again, you can use cable ties. They've been painted black so you won't be able to hardly see them at all when they're done. 1, 2, 3 around, and then tie them where you want them to be. And in this case I'm tying them around that original frame that we made out on the workshop bench. Now let's have a look at the plant material I've got. Arum lilies, camellias, amaranthus, and over here large geranium. I picked them all so they're big and bold because this is very big and bold, so when they go in we want them to be in scale. First in, these stunning big leaves, and if you place them they will also cover a lot of the metal from our original workings. Just add as many flower tubes as you need for this to all come together, and of course that touch of green immediately looks marvellous. Down it goes into there. The lilies, I don't want the lilies coming right up like this. They could, because it does carry on that curve, but it does make it a wee bit big for a table. If this was a table like a signing table at a wedding it would work, but if it's for people to sit around it's getting pretty big as it is without having it way up like that, so we'll make them shorter. And then the stunning camellias. Look at that, isn't it astonishing? Down into the top. And last one on this side. I'm just going to place a couple here at the base, at the back, to finish it off. And so there it is, a cornucopia made with sticks, filled with pine cones, all ready to be wow. I was given the ceramic dough recipe way back in 2007 in a workshop, and you know I have never ever seen it used for flower arranging, and yet it's amazing. Here it is, the 2007 version that I made of a cornucopia with this dough, and maybe you can hear. It's very, very hard. We're going to start with 1 cup of water. And then 1.5 cups of plain table salt. Doesn't even matter the size of your cup because this is all about ratios of one to the other. And then 3/4 cup of corn flour. Now I'm going to take that up to the kitchen, cook it over a very low heat until it resembled dry, fluffy, mashed potatoes. That took 10 minutes on a low heat, stirring it the whole time, and it was quite a strange sensation as it started to thicken, just pieces of it. The corn flour is there to thicken the water, and the salt is there to preserve it, and then you knead it. Now you could roll this onto a plastic horn shape or one of those cooking horns that they use for making waffles and things and wrap around them, or you could do what the concrete mix that people do in New Zealand, and you lay down some reinforcing. I didn't do that for the original, but I probably have learnt a lot since 2007. It's extremely malleable at this point. I mean, you can add dots, bows, leaves, anything to it, couldn't you, at this point? Okay, I'm going to leave it there for an hour or two so it just dries and cools a little bit. Meanwhile, let's have a look at the one that I did all those years ago and how we can use it. Just the tiniest bit of wet floral foam so it will sneak in there. And I've also picked flowers that are very small, in scale, lavender, Aurelia berries, a native red berry, Hypericum would do just as well, ivy, a purple ground cover, alyssum, and some cones of the conifer. Start with the things that are going to pour out the bottom. Decide how long you want your cornucopia to be. Now I actually don't want it too long, pop that one at the bottom. Stripping these right back, put some conifer on the side. Remember, it's all about plenty, prosperity, so lots of different things in this one. A few of these leaves that are the same that the berries came off of. The lavender coming in the back. Very cool gift for Valentine's Day. Lovely little favours for weddings. The rest of that ivy here. Just hiding the top. It's almost like making a little shoulder spray actually. Just all these funny little pieces that you've gathered. Extremely attractive, extremely quick. And it's all about variety. Fabulous for in a restaurant, just on a table of a restaurant. Particularly at the winter or the summer solstice, winter solstice. And that's it, as quick and simple as that. Really, really pretty. Now let's get back to making that cornucopia. So I've put it on baking paper while it cools down, simply to make it easier for myself and for you when you try it, to roll it. Baking paper is wonderful. Now it's quite cool now, and as it's cooled down it's dried out. You can see it's not nearly as floppy. We're going to roll it from corner to corner, and just as if you were doing it for baking, roll it and roll it. How are we looking? Yes. Roll it. Roll it. And that has reinforced it beautifully. Now you can play with these seams. You can push it on there. That's obviously going to be the bottom of it. And get it away from you. It's pretty thick on purpose. You can thin it down now because you've got the shape and it's not going to fall over. And if you left any in the pot, of course, you can curl up this end as well. 5 days have passed. I've wrapped it. I wrapped it because I didn't want it to, the seam to split on it, and it looked as if it was going to, and so that's how it's looking right now. I'm going to have to keep wrapping it just to keep these flat. Now it's still very wet, probably going to take maybe even a month. Because this is water based, it needs to be sealed before you add that floral foam in the middle, and this is what I will use when it's completely dry. It is an acrylic spray. It has to be acrylic because it's water based going on water based. If you use an oil based coating, it may dissolve this, but this definitely needs to be coated in something. So that's one product, and I got it and from a hardware shop. Spray that particularly on the inside, so if any water touches this, it doesn't just re-dissolve. This is a nice easy one. A slab of some sort of wood, just to show you a different way of putting your cornucopia on, and a hole drilled through the middle. Add some PVA, which is carpenter's glue if you don't know its commercial name, and then a piece of dowel. Wire netting. This is quite a fine wire netting, and obviously if you're going to have a big cornucopia it could be much bigger. Get a rough square shape and roll it. Now this time I'm going to use an O bowl, so I'm going to roll the opening so it is the size of the O bowl, because this also is going to be an upright one. So we roll it when you get to there, use a little piece of the wire just to push it down and hold it in place. Use gloves if it's too hard on your hands, and now roll this one down and like that. You can see the shape already happening. Okay, now this time I'm going to use yellow cable ties just so that you can see there's different ways of doing things. And we're going to cable tie one to the other. Obviously you can use wire. And that's holding it all in place. Now we don't need this excess here at all. So once again, out with the tin snips. That can be used for a tiny little cornucopia. And now either use wire and cable ties and wire this together again in 1 or 2, 3 places. Check that your bowl will fit inside here. I don't want this piece here either, so I am going to also cut that piece off. I'm not going to cut it there, I'm going to cut it up here. Because I want to be able, as you can see, I want to be able to bend these in like this, and it will help hold that oval in place. And there it is. Now that didn't take any time at all, and you've got yourself the foundation for an upright cornucopia. So we now have the dowel lovely and dry, and measure where the cornucopia is going to land on the platform here and where it's going to be straight across, and cut it just below there. So we're cutting it there. Now when we thread the cornucopia on, keeping that level, come down to there, and it should just touch the top of there. Now check that it's straight all the way around, and if it is straight all the way around, now we can attach the cornucopia to there with another cable tie. Do it loosely, check that you've got everything where you want it. My hole is slightly off centre, so I'm going to put it that way there. Level, yes, and tighten it up. Okay, now another one. I'm going to put a nail now through there and bend it over to hold it in place there, and that should then be lovely and straight from all sides. There's the nail. Doesn't have to be beautiful, you're not going to see it, and it's just holding that piece in place. And that is your very basic frame for a cornucopia, to which you can add anything. You could even add fabric to this and paint it with plaster of Paris. You could even add fabric to this and dip it in wax. There's all sorts of things you can do once you have got this basic shape. And of course, if you don't want the O bowl at the top, use test tubes. But on we go now, and the lovely twisted willow, and I probably will use 2 or 3 layers because I don't want any of the wire netting showing whatsoever, and just keep twisting it around, and when you get to the end, tuck it in. It's called wrapping. There's the end. Nothing more to say, I'll just get on with it. A progress report for you. I'm putting the thicker willow pieces at the top and the thinner ones right at the bottom, and you can see I am only half covering that wire netting. The wire netting really does start to disappear, so your choice when you stop. I've also left these long so you can just see I'm not using many of them at all. Most of this willow is just being pushed into the netting, but every now and again I get a thick one that has to be cable tied, not only to the wire netting but to other ones also there. So I'll carry on and finish it, and now you've seen that, I can start cutting off these cable ties so I end up with just little spots of yellow. That possibly took me an hour and a half. I just carried on adding more and more layers, and you can see that the cable ties are really just interesting tiny little yellow accents. Into the top here I'm going to put floral foam, but there is another wonderful possibility. This is the time now to put a potted plant in here. You would have already made this piece here big enough for it to sit in there and it would come out. So floral foam, I've cut a piece, I have wet it, and you can see inside the O bowl there are these little claws that hold it in, so there's no need for me to tie it down or anything. I've cut it to size and push it straight down. Now this is one of the things with novice flower arrangers. They think the floral foam has to go right to the edges. It doesn't. We can use a lot less floral foam than we normally do, because really you only need it where you're going to put the flower stems. Let's have a look at the plant material. This is perfect for a winter arrangement. All of these things grow in winter and they last. We have leucadendron, aurelia, variegated coprosma here, the very first of the oranges, an unknown berry that I picked in the paddock, and obviously it comes out this time of the year, and seed heads. So if you're needing this for Thanksgiving, these will be around at this time of the year, or plan to plant them in a bucket if you have got room, or find them at your wholesalers. So we'll start with the beautiful yellow coprosma. See what I mean? It goes right to the edge. You don't have to worry at all about the foam going right to the edge, and it's also at the same time covering the rest of that top piece of that wire netting. And diagonally another grouping of them over here. And have you now guessed why I used yellow cable ties? Because I was planning to use yellow foliage, and therefore now suddenly the yellow mean that those little accents all down through the willow have been connected with the top. If you're going to use red foliage or red flowers, change those cable ties to red, and if you don't want them at all, use black ones or brown ones. I now have some aurelia, and I picked, remember, all these things that they were in scale. Copper and aurelia going in there, and diagonally opposite here. Now these lovely berries. Red is a complementary colour of green, and with all this green and yellowness it is simply going to give a nice contrast, not only of colour but also of form. There's green ones in there as well. So what I put on that side I also put over on this side. Now I can start bringing the same things up through the middle. The leucadendron. And the leucadendron's got red stems, which of course is going to carry the red of those berries. Don't want it too high. Another contrast, bringing in the lime green so it keeps it all light. So this has created a pathway from one side over the top to the other side, and we're getting this whole wow look. Now I have just something out of the ballpark. I'm going to put in an orange. And I've got here a little skewer and cut the skewer down to size. Remember, this is a table setting. So my orange is going in there, and only one, because the other ones I am putting around the base. And it just brings the whole design down from the top down to the bottom. I'm now just filling any gaps in the floral foam with some more of my foliage, a few more berries. That looks finished, doesn't it? Because everything is connected, but there's still nothing connected to the actual willow. And so you're looking for something that's in the same colours as the willow. In winter, seed pods is the obvious. Put a few of these tucked in here just to acknowledge that there is something brown happening at the bottom that's also happening at the top. And it's done.